Welcome back to the Tux and Tomahawks podcast. I'm Adam Dorito, and today I'm going to 100% screw up your last name, but I have Andrés Caceres Solari.
Pretty good. That's pretty good.
Hey,
That's really
all
good.
right.
That's really good.
All right, I tried. In my job in the oil and gas industry, I do work with more Hispanic Americans. I am the minority, so I try. Normally, when I
That's
when
funny.
I when I hear puta and chingodera, I know I'm in trouble because something's fucking broken and someone's getting yelled at
But you get
outside.
fed well.
Yeah, I do get fed well. They have amazing tacos.
Yeah.
I love the oil and gas guys I work with. They're great. It's
That's
been
awesome.
fun driving around the United States, saving America with energy independence. But yeah, so I wanted to bring this guy on. He's talking to me from Norway, I believe,
No,
overseas.
Netherlands.
Norway, Netherlands, Norway, one of those European EU countries with an N in it. So we had to coordinate and find a good time to talk. But yeah, I know I've been intermittent with podcast episode guys because I've been so busy with politics and everything that's going on in DC, especially with the shutdown and everything. But when I have somebody come to me with a really good story about something that happened to them, I try to get them on as fast as I can and get their story published. So thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you. Thanks to you.
So tell us your background, tell us your story. You have a fascinating story, and there's no way I can do it justice. So tell us, what inspired you to join the military, and what led you to coming on the show today.
So I'm born in South America. I was born in Peru. And my parents moved legally to the United States when I was very, very little. And my mom's originally from Argentina. And my mom always talked about the times that she used to walk by the U.S. Embassy in Buenos Aires and see the Marines in uniform standing outside. And that was kind of her first impression of the U.S. Marines, of the U.S. Marine Corps. And she always talked about the Marines were always impressive. They always, clean cut, all these great things. I mean, she was a bigger recruiting poster than anybody else I know. And then eventually, when I came to the United States, I wanted to pay back all the great things that they've done for my family and allowed us to come in and leave oppressive regimes and crappy economies. And so I decided to join the Marine Corps as an officer when I was in college. And I was majoring in zoology. I wanted to be the next David Attenborough, and I was like, you know what? David Attenborough was a badass, but not as much as a badass as a Marine. So I became a Marine. And that's what I did. Went to OCS and I became a Marine in 1998. And I served for 19 years. It was awesome.
That's funny. I got to serve in the Marine Corps for a short period of time. I did my Marine OCS in 2009 in
Okay.
Brownfield and got hazed. It was a
Yeah.
good time. No, I love the Marine Corps. That's what I wanted to do after my whole story at the academy, and then the Air Force Academy stopped me from doing any of those things, and that's why I'm now in the Army. Go figure. But no, so what did you do in the Marine Corps after you graduated OCS? You became a Marine. Ironically, I was actually in Peru last year. Doing
Awesome.
a humanitarian mission down there outside of Barranco. That was a very interesting area.
Okay.
But yeah, no, fascinated to know about your Marine Corps career.
So I became a logistician. That was not my first choice, but that's what they gave me. And I did logistics for a while, but I just kind of, it's all right. It wasn't really my thing. But luckily, I went to Iraq, and as soon as I went to Iraq, I went to work with the ISF, the Iraqi Security Force, which is kind of cool. So a lot of engagement with the Iraqi Security Forces, a lot of the training and stuff like that. I was able to join up in a bunch of patrols and kind of underground kind of things. And I joined the Marine Expeditionary Unit as well, the 31st MU, which you're on ships and you sail all over the place. We got to do a real world mission down in southern Philippines. I was with a couple of the special forces groups and some of the SEALs in southern Philippines in the Holo archipelago, fighting some of the terrorist groups that were linked at the time with Al Qaeda. Now they're linked with ISIS. But and then Iraq once again, and I was once again working with Iraqi forces. This time was with the Iraqi oil, the Iraqi oil police, which is a dedicated police force for the Iraqi pipelines and infrastructure. And so all my deployed time, real world time, I didn't do logistics at all. I did a lot more on the ground kind of stuff, which is great. So that kind of inspired me to become a foreign officer, which the Army has and some of the other services have just different names. So I applied for the FAO the first time, got denied. I was relatively young, and I'm convinced that my regimental commander wanted to give bone to a major. I was a lieutenant at the time. At the time, I spoke 3 languages, and I passed the LPTs, the defense language tests, for all 3 languages. And but this guy only spoke English, so I got denied. They non-recommended me for the board. But the second time I applied, I got accepted, and I got Indonesian. So I went to Naples Graduate School. I went to DLI, Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California, and learned Indonesian. I self-taught Malay, which is very similar to Indonesian. And I also taught myself Portuguese. So by the time I finished DLI, I passed the Brazilian Portuguese exam, the Portuguese exam, the Malay exam, and also the Indonesian exam. So I had all these languages on top of German and Spanish in my record. Luckily, I was able to then get the additional MOSs for not just FAO for Foreign Air Officer for Southeast Asia, but for Western Europe and Latin America. So I had my resume, Marine Corps watch, was very, very strong. Most foreign air officers, they usually have one region. From time to time, you may have somebody has two. I have three. And I think there were only like maybe two in the entire Marine Corps that had three at the time. So it was pretty stacked, and I enjoyed it. And that's the reason why I ended up in the Netherlands here at the command over here at Joint Force Command Brunsum, which is NATO Command, one of the regional commands.
Yeah, that's really cool. Like FAOs are like really interesting areas in the military that nobody really talks about a lot, but it's kind of like it's very similar to like how civil affairs works. Like you're working with the community, you're working with top commanders and community leaders, and you're trying to understand the ins and outs of everything outside of blowing everything up. Because everything needs like food, water, and electricity, so to speak, right? But understand who the mayor is, who the guys are working on the ground, who's doing the infrastructure, all that stuff that makes society work. FAOs are a super important component to that, and integrating with politicians and guys on the ground and everything else. And it's kind of like having the really interesting liaison work that's very much underappreciated, I think, in the military. FAOs are definitely super important aspects of our military security plan.
Yeah, identify and shout the leaders. You got the leaders are there. This guy's the leader, but in reality, okay, who runs the plan?
Right.
Who runs it? Sometimes, like in the Southern Philippines, identified. It's not the local mayor. It's the local principal, is the local religious leader, and a guy that runs a business. When those three get together and they can make a decision, they'll tell the mayor what's happening, and the mayor's just like, okay, yeah, sure, no problem. So it's those things, and also it's the academic part of Naval Postgraduate School that you learn a ton. You get some top level PhDs with a ton of research, and you learn a ton of academic stuff that when you mix that with the tactical and the operational things, you can do some great things.
Yeah. So what happened after your experience at DLI and then going to the Philippines and everything else? How did your career progress from there?
So I went to Indonesia. I was working there for about a year, and it's a great program because they let you loose in the country for a whole year, and your job is to write reports on the country. And sadly, a lot of my peers end up doing cut and paste, essentially what it looks like Wikipedia cut and paste.
Yeah.
This country became independent on this particular year. The current president is, okay, tell me something new. So Indonesia has a history of a lot of insurgencies and dissidents and problems and fracturing and so on. So I started writing my reports on ground level grievances. And I was mapping every single one of them, whether they look like religious, whether they look like political, whether they look like ethnic, whether they look like nationalistic. I was grounding down everything down to economic hardship and people not feeling represented. And as a result, they were turning into whether it's supporting terrorism or drug dealing or illegal prostitution, human trafficking, whatever it is, in order to have to make a living. I'm not getting represented. I'm being disenfranchised by the local government. So I had to turn to these activities in order to support myself and my family. So I was going to, sadly, a lot of my peers would go to, hang out in Bangkok or hang out in some of the big cities or whatever. I was staying with families for $5 a night, including breakfast, sleeping on the floor. Understand the language. I was getting information from them, local leadership and so on. Troubling former refugee camps that have been turned into kind of duelings, and then some of the activities that were taking place over there, people being oppressed. So wrote. And I submitted all these to Defense Intelligence Agency. And I remember very clearly, like the guy in charge of the FAO program at the DOD was, at the time DOD, was said, look, I love your reports because they're so different. You are doing on the ground information, identifying names, identifying people, identifying events, identifying sources of grievances that we do not see.
Right.
The embassy is not collecting this.
No.
The country's definitely not saying this. And also, I remember I met with the economic guy for the U.S. Embassy. He had been there, I think, like 3 or 4 years, and he had been to Bali and Jakarta, where the embassy was. And that's it. And he's supposed to be the economic expert.
Yeah, how you can be no. So it's kind of funny because you were literally doing the work of what civil affairs does in the Army. And I know the Marine Corps has civil affairs as well. But
Yeah.
this is literally the mission, right? You have to figure out how the spider webs all connect. And
Correct.
all these guys, like whether embassies or whatever else it is, they don't have the time. They're gonna Wikipedia stuff. They're gonna go on the CIA World Fact Book, and that's how
Yep.
they're gonna download the information. But
Yep.
understanding how communities work from the ground level up, from like the farmer up, is super
Yep.
super important. Understanding how to gain influence in a region. So
Yep. Absolutely. It's essential. And then the cool thing about it is that once I left, it was 13 of the most amazing months of my life. I lost a ton of weight. I mean, I didn't have time to go to the gym. I was back in Jakarta maybe 2 days of the month, and the rest I was knee deep in places that people in the embassy didn't know where they were. I got as close as Papua that I could get. I could not get into Papua because of issues there, but I got to some little islands that had and communities that had never seen a non-local person since the war with the Netherlands.
wow.
I mean, yeah, yeah. So I loved it. And when I got back, I started putting on things on paper, and I started actually publishing articles in the Marine Corps Gazette, the Joint Force Quarterly. Of we need to start taking a different look at things. We need to start saying, it's great military cooperation is great, it's fantastic, and some of these humanitarian missions are great. Build a school, but you're not going to get students in if the families need the kids to stay at home to work.
Right.
You're not gonna get students. You have to address the economic problem. Economics is most of the time the bread and butter of a lot of these issues. So things like interdepartmental. Don't send just a bunch of Marines in there.
Right.
Send some Marines and grab a couple of farmers that
Mhm.
know how to let's this is how you do things. This is how you take advantage of this with your resources that you have. Don't give them this crazy, big machine to do things where they cannot repair it. So experts, along with the military personnel.
Yeah.
So I publish extensively.
No, I mean that's a huge resource that you've given the U.S. military because I said not a lot of foreign area officers or even like civil affairs teams get to get that type of in depth. I mean that's what I specialize in. Like my job is I go on the ground and I do analysis in oil and gas infrastructure and industrial and civilian wastewater treatment systems. Right, like. Who in the Army knows how to do that? No one. They're like, I just go to the water buffalo. That's where my water comes from. But when you're going into these villages and these farming lands, and it's going to poison their cattle or the population, you could wipe out an entire population just from poisoning the water source, right? So, learning how to purify that, learning what the sources are, sources and methods, and things like that, it's super important. So, no, I mean that's an inspiring story of how you've been able to do all those things, and also kind of give like the background about how that works. Like everyone just thinks, oh, I'm in the military, I'm going to go deploy with a gun and go stand out in the middle of nowhere. It's not how it works, right? So. So where'd you go from there?
So I went to Iwakuni Command in Iwakuni, and that was a great 3 years. I inherited a command, and I wrote this in the book as well. I inherited a command that was plagued with, typical Marines getting in trouble for drinking too much and doing alcohol-related incidents.
Yep.
Over the weekend. That was very common. But the biggest problem was that there was an issue with indirect fraternization. And I say indirect because what was happening was that some of the spouses were hanging out with some of the spouses of the guys in charge of the unit. Mm-hmm. And because of that informal link, they would have access to some of the higher ups and they got things done. So what that created was an unofficial chain of command where a lance corporal had more clout than a gunnery sergeant. Mm-hmm. So, and E3 had more clout than E7. So, and that created a lot of problems, and there was some illegal fund issues as well. So one of the things that I decided was like, I'm going to cut this, in the head. I'm going to snap the head of this. So I'm not hanging out with anybody on the weekend. I'm hanging out with my family. I'm not going out drinking with any of the officers. No. I'm hanging. In fact, people in the base, they always saw me hanging out with my 5-year-old daughter. Mm-hmm. That's what I did. Hung out and went to the playground and everything. And no. So, and one of the things I did was I tackled the problem with the drinking by my biggest problem with my corporals, my E4s, the first rank of NCO, the first rank of enlisted leader. Right. And I created a book club. So I would grab books, I grab a particular chapter. And I would sit down I would tell them, let's go ahead and discuss this, leadership traits and battles, everything from war in the Philippines to could be Napoleon, could be World War II, could be the Persian Gulf, whatever it is, and talk about, look at the decisions that this particular corporal had to do and why. And so that started creating a separation between the E3s and the corporals, because now you're in the commander's book club.
Yeah.
And also I started making them, it's like, if you're a corporal, you're gonna dress with a collar shirt on the weekends.
Yep.
Because if you dress professional, you act professional. Anyway, I got a lot of heat for it, because I'm doing something new. Yeah. I'm doing something innovative. I don't want to start just punishing people. I want to put them in a position where they make better decisions. We went 364 days without a single alcohol-related incident.
That's good.
A Marine unit will have a hard time making 20.
Right.
We went almost a year. So, and we became the example of the entire regiment. And one of the cool things about it was that we had two pretty nasty inspections. One was phase move inspection, field supply maintenance, and office analysis office inspection, which is the kind of inspection that relieves commanders. And we had another inspection as well. It's called the CGRI, Commanding General Readiness Inspection. We passed them with flying colors. Inspections that in the past my sister units had failed. Mm-hmm. And they had failed so often, and the rate of failing was so high that they were turning these inspections into assist visits until it came to until it came to our turn. Mm-hmm. It came to our turn. No, this is a real inspection. So, and we passed it with flying colors. So I left that command feeling great. All of a sudden, I get orders to come to the Netherlands as a land operations officer. I'm like, this is the higher headquarters for ISAF in Afghanistan. I'm going to be able to use all the experience I have of underground working, all the Naval Postgraduate School education that I have. I'm bringing it to work and, policy, operations, strategic planning, and in support of the Afghan operation and listen to the guys on the ground over there, what's going on.
Right.
So I arrived in Joint Force Command headquarters in 2013. So NATO, you got NATO Brussels, which is the Supreme Allied Headquarters Command. And they have two main regional commands. One here in the Netherlands that's in charge of the northern part of Europe, as well as the areas of interest, which is Ukraine. Ukraine's not part of NATO, but it's an area of interest. Russian activities are an area of interest. And also the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, areas of interest, because whatever happens there affects our European partners. And eventually us, the United States. And then you have the other commanders in Naples, which are in charge more or less of the Mediterranean. Right. So one of the things with, they at the time, they were, like I mentioned before, they were the higher headquarters of ISAF. So ISAF, Afghanistan, reported directly to General Domrose, General Commanding General over here. So I got here and I was like, great, man. This is the cream of the crop. We're going to be doing great things. Not so much. I arrived, I became the land operations officer. And one of the first tasks that I was given to fill temporarily was to be the watch officer. So they were hurting for watch officers. So it's like, yeah, I'll take the watch officer billet from time to time whenever you need it. And that was the only 24/7 billet. And what we did was compile the brief, the morning brief in the morning, which was called the situational awareness brief, which is saying the last 24, the next 24, essentially, of NATO operations and things happening in the world. And the biggest portion, the first portion, was what's going on in Afghanistan. And so I would sit there and I started listening to the briefs for the first month so I could get used to what they were doing. And all they were, it was cut and paste numbers of wounded in action, killed in action, couple of operations, and essentially that was it. There's really no analysis. There was no, like, this happened in this region and this is why it's so important. Oh, by the way, this particular region last year was in full control of the Afghan National Army, and now we see Taliban activity. And now Taliban activity has increased so much percent. There was no comparison of last year, of years before. Yeah. One of the things I learned this with Army guys, what are the effects of our actions? What are the effects? We do something, what are the effects? Yes. Right. Okay, so we destroyed our Taliban headquarters, or we destroyed, whatever it is. What are the effects? So what? Okay, we destroyed it, so what? What are the implications? What capability did we take away from them? Or maybe we didn't take away anything. What do we have to do next? What do we have to pursue? None of the discussion was taking place. And it was also a very light audience. I mean, the NATO headquarters here was packed with personnel. Mm-hmm. And for the SAV, this particular morning brief, we would get maybe 10, 15 people show up. Generals, we had one general come up. He was a French general. He would sit down. and listen to our briefs. But the job fell under the J3, and the J3 officer, the J3 was a U.S. general. He never showed up.
Yeah.
In fact, he would show up at work at 9, and our brief was at 8:30. So 9:05, that's when he should show up. So it was a very clear message to us that whatever we did was not important to him. And that was the flavor of the brief itself. And so all of a sudden I get to do the briefs, and I was like, no, I'm gonna start digging in. One of the things I'm starting to see is like, how come I keep seeing that the ANA is losing ground? The Afghan National Army. Why is the Taliban resurging? And then I start digging. Okay, look at last year. Let's look at last year. Let's look at the maps. Let's look at the events. I also start looking back at. I start getting through back channels, and this is not being reported, but looking through back channels. The Afghan National Army is reporting they have all these numbers, all these great full battalions and full divisions, and they're getting their butts kicked by the Taliban.
Yeah.
What's going on? And one of the things I started getting from back channels from people that I know that they were there, or they are there. They tell me, it's like, look, they're reporting that they have 20,000 in a particular unit. They really have 10,000. Mm-hmm. The numbers are halved or even more. And the reason why they're overinflating these numbers is because if a commander, the divisional commander says, I got 20,000 or 30,000, he gets 30,000 paychecks.
Right.
But if he's got only 10,000, he gets a buck at 20,000. Not just paychecks, but money for food and water.
Right.
So not only he pockets the 20,000 money worth of food and water, he pockets more because he gives him really low quality food, and then wood for heating, firewood.
Yep.
Let him freeze. He picks all the money. So the corruption was rampant. Mm-hmm. And I was actually analyzing this with the background of this is exactly what happened in South Vietnam.
Yes.
As the U.S. had left, the South Vietnamese corruption was so rampant that the soldiers were under-equipped, under-trained, unmanned, and demoralized.
Yeah.
Which is why the North Vietnam was able to just run rampant to the south, without a hitch. So as I was briefing this, I started really getting a lot of grief from lieutenant colonels and colonels. I was a major at the time. And it was like, where are you getting this from? I was like, well, I'm getting this from unofficial channels from different people, and this story needs to be told. One of them even questioned my patriotism. Interesting. He's like, whose side are you on? I'm like, I'm on the side of the guys that are about to lose if nothing gets done. Mm-hmm. And that's what really fired me up. And I just I'm going to keep on briefing. I keep on briefing. My brief was followed by an intel brief, which is full of outdated information. I mean, you had intel that was 2 weeks old. Yeah. 3 weeks old. It was useless. And the first thing that they had this beautiful little slide that said that if I'm not told to brief from other areas, I'm only briefing this, which is essentially old Afghan information. Eventually I was actually removed from, you're done with the watch officer. You're going to go back to your billet. They didn't want me to brief on Afghanistan anymore. I was raising way too many flags that need to be risen. And okay, you're going to go back to land operations. So I was like, okay, that's fine. I was ordered not to brief Afghanistan anymore. I won't, but I'll focus on other areas. Now, this is 2013. So I went back to land ops, and I had a different portion of the brief, which is briefing on land operations. My predecessors were, once again, cutting and paste. A lot of Google cut and paste. And I decided to start kind of digging some of the things that were going, and I paid particular attention to what was happening in Iraq in the Al-Anbar province. Mm-hmm. One of the things with the Al-Anbar province is that at the time in Al-Anbar, Al-Qaeda was beginning to rise again. So when we left in 2011, we left a power sharing deal between the Sunnis, the Shias, and the Kurds. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we were fearing, which actually happened, was Maliki, the prime minister at the time, was like, he was going to jail all the leadership that he was supposed to power share with upon us exiting, which he did. So the Sunnis lost the representation that they originally had, Maliki being Shia. And all of a sudden, Sunnis went out to the streets to protest peacefully. So this Al-Anbar province that had been fought for tooth and nail by both Army and Marine Corps for several years. Ramadi and Fallujah, Al-Qaeda was running rampant. The Sunni tribes were supporting Al-Qaeda. And it wasn't until 2007, 2008, 2009, when the Sunni tribes were like, look, we need to get rid of two folk over here, the U.S. and Al-Qaeda. But if we side with the U.S. and we get rid of Al-Qaeda, the U.S. will leave too. So that was what's called the Al-Anbar Awakening. And it worked that way. Eventually, they brought down to violence in Al-Anbar to like criminal levels, like New York City levels.
Right.
It was no terrorism anymore. So, that worked. But the problem is that if the balance of power was altered, Al-Qaeda was going to start getting their support. So one of the things that I was briefing, it was like, Maliki is doing some pretty nasty, brutal reprisals against the Al-Anbar population, and this is probably going to backfire. Al-Qaeda in Iraq may be debilitated, but they're still there. And the longer this goes, Al-Qaeda is going to be like, I told you so. You should support us from the get-go. And that's exactly what happened. Al-Qaeda in Iraq grew again, and all of a sudden, it turned into ISIS in 2013. So I began to brief about ISIS excessively. I began to brief out, Ramadi fell, Fallujah fell at the time. I was ignored. People walk out of the briefs. I was asked, who the hell is ISIS? I remember one particular colonel, U.S. colonel, telling me, those are a bunch of pissed off Arabs that won't amount to anything.
Yeah.
And we have the responsibility of overwatch on this particular area because it's an area of interest of NATO. Kept on briefing. And it wasn't until June of 2014 when Mosul fell that all of a sudden the news started reporting on ISIS worldwide. And one of the things about Mosul falling, I don't know if you remember that was June 2014.
Yep.
Was that the initial target of ISIS was not Mosul itself, was the prison. They wanted to liberate a bunch of their fellow ISIS guys that had been captured. And when they reached the prison, the army in Mosul, 30,000 worth of Iraqi army and police, left their weapons on the ground and took off running. And ISIS was like, let's just take Mosul too.
Right.
And they did. And that's when you see all of a sudden the ISIS is running around with tanks, with Humvees, with like major equipment. The effect of the Iraqi army surrendering to ISIS was so great that the prices of weapons in Iraq plummeted because the markets were overloaded, oversaturated with weapons. That's how bad it was. So I kept on briefing. I was still keep getting ignored. There was a particular brief that I asked to brief at the commander's update brief, which was a brief for all the generals and the commander that happened on Wednesdays. I was kept away from it. I would write reports, one-pagers, point papers, send them in, would get shredded. My briefs would get deleted. But I was like, I'm not going to stop. I'm going to be talking about it. And then simultaneously was Ukraine. So in 2013, right at the time frame, Ukraine, I don't know if you remember, but they had this association agreement going on with the European Union. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I was briefing is like, look, the president of Ukraine is in a tough spot. Whether we like it or not, he's in a tough spot because he's got a great majority of people of Ukraine that want an association with the EU. But if that happens, what's going to happen with the Russian base in Sevastopol, Crimea, which Russia has a lease on? And simultaneously, if he goes against it, he's probably going to get toppled. And as someone briefing this, a bunch of, I remember generals and colonels go like, nothing's going to happen. Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia broke away and nothing happens. Like, no, you don't understand. We're talking about the Black Sea Fleet and the future of the Black Sea Fleet. This is a golden pearl of Russia. And Putin's not going to want to let go. Ukraine is a little bit different.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
Ukraine is not Belarus. Ukraine is not Kazakhstan. Ukraine is a little bit different. Once again, dismissed again. A lot of lieutenant colonels told me just shut up. I remember one lieutenant colonel telling me, why are you doing all this work? You're in Europe. Enjoy it. Go to Ramstein for the weekend. Just travel. I mean, I enjoyed my weekends.
What year was this when you were briefing them on this? It was right before the invasion, right?
2000. This is 2000. This is 2013.
Oh yeah, so okay. So the funny thing is I was deployed over there right before the invasion kicked off, and I was there when the invasion happened, right?
Okay.
And the funny thing is, all the things that you're talking about is exactly, I mean, the things we can talk about. I was giving them like 1,000-year history background on this. I'm like, guys, I don't think you understand. This is way bigger than you think it is. This is way more involved than you think it is.
Yep.
Like they want this. This is their warm water ports for their subs and their fleets. This is the grain and oil and gas trading area of the entire European country. They control the Bosphorus Straits out of here. This controls the food supply to the Middle East to the port of Tartus in Syria, which is why Russia's in Syria. If they control the port of Tartus, they control the exports out of Ukraine. Then they can regain Middle Eastern influence and control the global energy supply and the global food supply for the Middle East. And whoever controls the food and the access to energy controls the influence of the area. This is not about the freedom or territory gain of Ukraine. This has nothing to do with like, oh my God, these poor innocent people. This is strictly a strategic move that they were trying to do under a weak U.S. administration that they thought they could take advantage of. And there was like, you're fucking crazy. Shut up, you Putin sympathizer. I'm like, I'm not. I'm just telling you the reality of what's going on here. This is literally my fucking job.
I mean, and that was the part. It's like, and my reply to this particular lieutenant colonel was like, I enjoy my weekends. I travel my butt off. In 3 months, I've seen more places than you have in the past 3 years.
Oh God, I hate these people.
But it doesn't mean that when I get here, I'm putting my work because I'm getting paid. I'm getting paid. I'm putting in work in. So it was very frustrating, and it wasn't until February when all of a sudden Putin crosses. And Donbass war, and all of a sudden now we have people to debrief.
Of course.
Now we have people sitting down. Well, the problem was that they hijacked our brief, and we would see in one big conference room with the general that was now sitting, all the generals were there. I mean, I think I'm pretty sure that some of these guys, this is the first time they ever saw that particular conference room in the JOC, in the Joint Operations Center. And all of a sudden, that we were kind of excluded from briefing the general, and they put their own people. And one of the things that they were talking is, you got these people briefing the general, telling them, Russia's going to collapse in a matter of 2 weeks or 3 months. The magic number was 3 months. They will never be able to keep this up in Crimea. The ruble's collapsing, so that means the country's collapsing, and all this information that I have a hard time believing that they were getting this information even from fake news. They were pulling this out of their rears. Literally, they would sit down and they're like, a couple of 3 months from now. That was their attitude, and the general was listening to this. And the Russian people are already poor. They're going to be even poorer. So they're going to take out Putin. And one of the things that was
Russians work though, like
exactly
Russians, like this is like the biggest. I don't know if you'll agree with me as like a fellow somewhat analyst on this. The Russians have been through such hard shit before that like they are only going to flinch when they lose over 500,000 fucking people. They have to lose a lot of people. They are willing to like lay bodies down. They don't give a shit. And the second of all is that the Russians don't care. As long like in America, we have 35 choices of yogurt every time we go to the grocery store. The Russians only care if they have one. If they at least have one choice of yogurt left on the shelf, then Putin's doing an amazing job because they still have yogurt. Right? These people are so much harder and so much more stoic than Americans are. Like, I don't think you're like right now, and people really don't want to admit this. Russia's thriving. They are not suffering at all. Like, they have rebuilt their industrial base. They're producing tanks again. Like, oh yeah, we have all these sanctions and everything else, but like everybody's going back to the good old communist social work jobs, and everyone's hanging out and being self-sufficient again, and living off of rationing and just like the good old days. Like they're used to this. Americans couldn't handle this for more than 20 minutes. I swear to God. Like they,
and that's one of the things I was arguing. I was arguing, it's like if you look at culture, the Russians will always go back to the Great War.
Always.
To the Great Patriotic War.
Always.
We've done it before. It's happened to us before. Not only that, and
we persevered.
Yeah, we persevered. And that's one of the things I was talking to some of the international officers. I remember I was talking to a Brit, to a French, and a German. It's like, what are your traditional folk songs? Your traditional folk songs, what do they talk about? Love, the harvest, and God knows whatever else. Fun things. What do traditional Russian folk songs talk about? Suffering.
Yep.
The plague. from the Mongols to Attila the Hun to the Nazis crossing over and killing everybody in Stalingrad. They talk about suffering. I was like, and I told the particular French officer, it's like, sir, what happens if right now your French government raises your retirement age by 1 day? You know, Paris gets shut down. Everybody would blockade Paris. That's exactly what's going to happen.
Yep.
But, you know, same thing in the UK. Probably not so much in Germany, but, you know, not as drastic, but it will happen. Russians, you raise their retirement age or you delete it, Russians will go back to work, not a problem, because they're used to suffering. And that's one of the cultural things that you have to understand culture. You have to understand history. You know, how many times has the Russian government collapsed? Usually as a result of a great calamity. World War One. What was the other one? Then when the Yeltsin, well, obviously the war in Afghanistan. Then when the first Chechen war that led Putin to eventually take over, that's when Yeltsin fell. You know, it takes some major cataclysms in history, and even some years afterwards, to change the Russian government. It's not overnight. It's not because you raise taxes. You know, it's not overnight. And they didn't want to hear it. No, it's going to collapse. So they were talking, oh, we got the sanctions actually going to hit him. One of my arguments was, and I was trying to brief, and I was stuck in one moment I was able to brief it. The sanctions at the moment, 2014 sanctions, were barely topical.
Yeah.
They were very personal.
Mm-hmm.
This oligarch, that oligarch. We won't, you know, you won't be able to draw money from your ATM, from your account, and so on and so on. They're very, very topical. And I was arguing until the moment that you're able to prohibit Russia from being able to make international payments through the SWIFT system,
the SWIFT payment system, right?
You will not be able to do a significant, not detrimental, a significant hit. And one of the things also that I was arguing, I was like, look, you can tell people to not buy oil from Russia, but you go to Azerbaijan and the Caspian Sea, and they will reroute oil.
Yeah, and they do it all the time.
And now they do it.
Yeah, it's not.
And that's one of the things I was briefing. It's like, this is what's going to happen. Azerbaijan will do it. Azerbaijan has a great gas and oil, as you well know, you know, and they're just down the road. And it's, you know, who's going to block them?
Nobody. And then they also they'll pipeline it down to Saudi, and then they mix it in their tanks, and then they just sell it to Saudi, and then Saudi sells it on behalf of them. Like it's
exactly
not like sanctions against Russia for oil do absolutely nothing.
No, exactly. Another thing I was talking, there was a really, really bad, and funny thing is that we had an economic expert in the Intel section, which was useless. The whole Intel section was useless. Like I told you before, I mean, a lot of old Intel regurgitated, cut and paste from higher headquarters briefs.
Yeah.
They were briefing that the ruble was collapsing, and because the ruble went down, our economy is going to be destroyed. I was like, okay, let's remember after 9/11, what happened to the US dollar?
In
US
2000, yeah.
9/11, the US dollar dropped.
Yep.
But part of it was to make our exports cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
When you drop the dollar, exports become cheaper. Our exports become more attractive, so people buy more. You know, it sucks when you're traveling, but it's great for an economy, and that's exactly what Russia wants. We just did this invasion. We need to fund it. You know, when you acquire a new piece of territory and you bring it into your country, it takes a lot of money. As the Germans, you know, when they integrated East Germany into West Germany, that was a pretty penny.
Mm-hmm.
And let's maximize our exports, and that's exactly what they did. So the amount of misinformation was just rampant. And this is right around the time as well that I think right at the time General Domrosa, the German general in charge of JFCBS, began to notice how misinformed and underinformed and non-informed he was. That the staff was not really giving him what he needed. There was a particular trip that General Domrosa and his staff had to do to Afghanistan. You know, the kind of higher headquarters visiting the lower headquarters in Afghanistan. And from what I understand, our command, GFC Brunson, could not articulate one decent question to them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they've essentially went there as tourists. And it was embarrassing. So when he came back, he established what was called, he's like, I need to be briefed more. I need to know really what's going on. I mean, okay, so you got this guy who's been briefing some pretty nasty hard truths for about a year. I was told to shut up, and now you want to hear it? Okay. So one of the issues that he raised was like, I need somebody to to let me know. I need any information flow a lot more often in Afghanistan. So they created this cell, what's called the Afghan Fusion Cell. So instead of the staff, like the J1 doing their part, the J2 doing the part, the intel logistics doing their part, according to whatever the formations, they have this bad habit of creating these little cells.
Yeah.
Which essentially was what they called, funnily, people called it the Brunson Labor Project.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was a bunch of underemployed and bored officers that filled up that cell. And all they did was, once again, cut and paste and brief it to the general every single Wednesday. And as you well know, 2021 came around and we lost Afghanistan. Obviously, no significant information was taking place. And right on the time frame was, so with this kind of conscious, like, I'm not being told I don't understand this, Domrose also requested, I want a deep dive on ISIS.
Yeah.
I need to know what's going on with ISIS. For a commander to have to ask that, an intel brief on ISIS for the entire command, that's pretty sad. That's, you see something in the horizon, you shouldn't have to hit the pothole on the road to get a brief on the possible pothole when you should have seen this, a mile away. So they General Demers, I want a deep dive on ISIS. I want to know what ISIS was. And a lot of people, when it came to that, the intel section was tasked with that. But I had already been briefing ISIS for several months, and the audience in the job was getting bigger and bigger. And in fact, that French general I told you about, Mikhail Yakovlev, he appears a lot in France 24, especially talking about Ukraine, or he used to. He's retired now. He's down in Paris now. But he used to love my briefs. He used to call it the Marines ISIS brief. So there were only a handful of Marines there. And he put me in there. It's like, okay, now we get to listen to what's going on. And I go in there, and he was one of my biggest fans. But then they gave the intel to do the job. And I was kind of glad. It's like, okay, they should do their job. Yeah. And the task landed on a particular major, U.S., who I'm going to call Major Gamer, because that's exactly what he did. He, at the first opportunity to be able to leave the building, to grab a cell phone to play, I don't know, what's that, one of those phone games, Angry Birds or whatever it is, he'd run out. When he got home, he was on his Xbox or whatever it is. That's all he did day in, day out. He was given the task to provide the brief. So I approached him. I was like, hey, man, do you need help? No, I got it. And the fact that he was, I got it, knowing him, I was like, I don't think you got it. And I was like, let me look it over so I can give you some pointers and, add some information to make it a little more critical. So he put it together. And one of the, by the time I see it, I sit down, I see a nice little map. I told him, make sure you want to put a map of the Mediterranean with Europe and North Africa and whatever. And in North Africa, I told him, it's like, there's groups all over this area, and there's also some groups, sympathizing groups with ISIS in some of these other countries. So I see the map, and I see that there's none of the groups that I told him that are active in Algeria and Libya or in Egypt are there. And I was like, what happened to all the groups that I told you about? So no, that area doesn't matter. I was like, what do you mean doesn't matter? So there's something else. Like, what do you mean there's something else? Well, it doesn't matter because ISIS is Muslim and those countries are not Muslim. North Africa. This intelligence officer is telling me that the countries in North Africa are not Muslim. And I was like, I honestly, I was like,
oh my God.
I was like, are you pulling my leg?
The people that Hegseth want out of the fucking military, dude. It's like, I am so sick and tired of this circle jerk. Like, the amount, look, there are some amazing officers, NCOs, and people in the military. I've worked with them, but there are some incredibly incompetent fools that are constantly skull dragging everybody down to the ground with them because they are incompetent, they are uneducated, they don't understand anything. They are stopping operation from being fluid and transparent. And at the end of the day, I'm sure this gets guys killed. This type of incompetence is what gets guys killed, right? And they don't like it when you start shining a light to how dumb they are. And it's nothing. It's not being a dick. It's just you suck at your job. And I always tell people this, like, you know how many 4-star generals we had during World War II, Andres?
Actually, I don't know.
7. We had
Okay.
7 4-star generals during World War II, and we fought Japan and Germany and Italy and all the other bad guys, right?
Yep.
You know how many we have today, right before Hegseth took over?
Nah, I don't know.
47. Right? So you just talk about the corporate gloat, you know, and all these guys who do nothing. And I understand we have more advanced combatant commands, and there's different things we've added. We have new technology. I get that. But like the problem, it's so top heavy. There's too many chiefs and not enough Indians. And the problem is they are so satisfied with, if we could just do nothing as much as possible, we can get our retirement, get our 6-figure salary job in the Pentagon, you know, work for a government contractor afterwards at the expense of that E1 and E2 and E3 who are still outside, you know, mopping the motor pool in the rain. Right? It's
Yeah, and it was insane. I sat down. I was like, "You got to be kidding me!" So I sat down with him, and I'm going through the amount of. I mean, this. I don't know where he got this information. So, and the sad part, it was that this was blessed by the powers that be of the Intel Directorate.
Oh my God!
I mean, you got colonels in there. You got civilians that were colonels. I'm like, who blessed this? Well, this told me it was okay. It's like, are you kidding me? So I'm going through it. I'm not an Intel guy. I've never been an Intel guy. But you and I know that when you're briefing an enemy, one of the biggest, most important parts to brief is the center of gravity.
Yep.
What's the center of gravity of the enemy? To not know what the center of gravity of the enemy is, it's like, and I put in the book, it's like a real estate agent not knowing how many bathrooms and bedrooms there are in the house they're trying to sell. It's pretty basic. So I'm looking through it, and I was like, "Where's center of gravity? Where's center of gravity slide, dude?" And he's like, "I don't think they have one." I was like, "Do you know what a center of gravity is?"
I don't think they have one.
This is a major. So this is a major. This is a major. Yeah, 15 years. And I said, "Do you know what a center of gravity is?" It's essentially what holds everything together. Like if you take it out, you know, everything falls apart. And I was like, you know, like the Yugoslavian campaign, Slobodan Milosevic, it was his support base. Yeah. In Iraq, 2003 was Saddam itself. You know, there's always something. And then you have to identify that if we take this out, then, you know, we'll make a major blow to the enemy, closer to a victory.
Right.
So I told him, it's like, when is the brief is tomorrow, man? I was like, so I put a bunch of notes, and I was like, you know, I live relatively close to you. Let me know if you need help, but you need a lot of work to do. And I have no problem coming in early in the morning, like at 5 a.m. to help you out and dig information. And I kind of put some stuff in there, you know, get in your super secret computers and look. So I'm sure somebody has an analysis on the center of gravity for ISIS. So the following morning, there was a big auditorium, huge auditorium. We all sit down, and he gets up there and starts briefing. This information I gave him made it up there, and the brief ends, and there's no slide on the center of gravity. So at this moment, as is, you know, the people that are sitting there, a great majority of them have been reading and listening to my briefs on ISIS. Like I said, I got pretty famous about being the ISIS guy, the Marines ISIS brief. So people are talking to me and commenting, "Hey, do you see this? Yeah, you know, these are the facts, and this is what I'm worried about. You know, this happens, this could also happen, so on." So people, I can start listening, like, you know, what was this? I'm like, we could, you know, and they're looking at me like, "Andres, why didn't you brief?" I'm like, "I'm not getting involved." So all of a sudden, and I'm like, there's no center of gravity slide. And I know any commander with 2 brain cells would ask, "What's center of gravity?" So I sank on my chair. I remember
they went to war college too, by the way.
Say again?
They probably went to the war college too.
Oh yeah. So I'm sitting there. I'm kind of sliding, and I'm like, "Please don't ask a question. Please don't ask a question. Please don't ask a question." Of course, General Don Rose asks, "What's the center of gravity?" And the intel guy said, "We don't know."
We don't know.
And you could hear like, "Whoa," in the entire audience. I mean, luckily, Don Rosa was nice enough that he didn't rip him a new one.
Yeah.
But next to him was the U.S. general, who was also clueless about it. And people were looking at me like, "Andres, you need to say something. You need to stand up." And I was like, "You got to be kidding me." Like, at this moment, this becomes a very embarrassing moment for the U.S. delegation.
Yes,
in NATO.
It does.
Because the top civilian guy was a U.S. guy. The top colonel in the intel section was a U.S. guy, and the guy that was briefing was a U.S. guy. So I was like, screw these guys. I raised my hand. And like, I know General Martinez, like, kind of looking back to like the U.S. general was kind of looking back to like somebody to save the day. And he tells me to speak. And I was like, sir, the center of gravity of ISIS is popular support. The Sunnis have no other option but to support them. And this is the reason why. And I talk about the power sharing deal. I talk about Maliki. I talk about the peaceful protest, and they were getting bogged down. So I went back to Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which morphed into ISIS. And oh, by the way, I told them there's a very high chance that ISIS will get into Afghanistan. And this is going to directly affect our mission there. And I saw from the corner of my eye, the intel guys, if looks could kill, I would have been dust in seconds.
Yeah.
In fact, in my book, I write, I submit a letter as evidence in my appendices, where one of the officers there that says that I was the target of their hatred. Because my job was making them look bad. I mean, they look like clowns. So right around the same time, this was fall of 2014. That added even more support to my briefs. And it's like, okay, if I'm getting this far into informing the command of ISIS and hopefully, making them to do decisions or raising this to higher, I'm going to try to do the same with Ukraine. So I put a brief together, and in order not to make sure that people were not butthurt, I sat down with the intel section. Like, look, I would like to do a joint brief. And I told them this is what we're going to brief. I'm going to brief some hard truths that people need to listen. People need to know that in 3 months are going to collapse. It didn't, and this is the reason why. And that Putin can do this for years. So I sat down. I was talking about a lot of economics and a lot of culture. So you have to understand this about Russia, economics and culture. And this is a supporting pillar to what they're doing and how far they can do it and how far long. So all these assumptions that you've been hearing in the past, I'm sorry if you're a high rank, this is bad information. Right. So I submitted it. Initially, kind of just looked it over. Yeah, sounds good, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I was going to pitch 90% of it. And this particular other intelligence officer was going to pitch theirs. So I was scheduled to pitch it. It was at 8:30 in the morning on a particular weekday. It was the fall of 2014. And all of a sudden, like literally 10 minutes before the brief began, like everyone was getting around, whatever, my brief was loaded. The intel people to be the higher ups came running into the office of the director of the Joint Operations Center. Mm-hmm. They were there for like a couple of minutes and they left. And all of a sudden, one of the orderlies came out running. It's like, Andres, the order is for you to not brief today. Delete the brief. I was going to protest. I can delete it. I can ask questions later and figure out what happened. I deleted it in a matter of seconds. Got rid of it. I told the guys, hey, get me off the list. I'm not briefing today. I was just told. I was deleted. And instead, it was more of the crappy information. Sanctions are going to hit next month. Putin's going to fall. He won't make it to Christmas. This is 2014. And Ukraine will win this war. It's not a problem. The Russian military is going to collapse. The rebels are going to run back to Russia. Just crap. And then I got the feedback from the JOC director, and he was telling me, he said, yeah, I heard that you didn't bounce this off from the intel guys. I'm like, I did, sir. I talked to them for several days. And now what you see is just bad information again. They just kind of shrug it off and whatever. So this was the same guy that I had written several point papers, and he kept just deleting my briefs and shredding my information. Mm-hmm. And then, so this fall of 2014, and then the NATO does exercises. They do command headquarters exercises. So They deploy their command headquarters over to Poland, to Bydgoszcz, Poland, where there's a bit of a NATO couple of buildings there. And the objective of the exercise is to show the Russians that we can deploy forward and we can command and control forces. Simultaneously, there were some field training exercises of Army units and Navy units in the area and Air Force units in the area that we kind of took control of and show that we can do it and we can here to defend the alliance. So I get there and I'm like, okay, great. I look at this. I look at the schedule, and I'm like, fantastic. On Friday, there's like a full afternoon dedicated to analysis of the war in Ukraine. And I'm like, just going to tell you, we're going to talk about capabilities. We're going to talk about courses of action, most dangerous, more likely, the least likely, and so on. I'm like, fantastic. I was inspired by this.
Right.
So the exercise takes place, right? So everybody has their own seat and their own job to take. It's a big headquarters. The whole headquarters are deployed. And sadly, a lot of my peers would be at their seats, drunk or heavily hungover and passed out. They were like on duty, not being able to operate. Coming in late, passed out on benches outside. I remember one Polish officer asking me, he's like, what happened? Spring break last night? And I was like, and I looked at him, I was like, sir, spring break is not for spring, it's the fall right now. And he put his hand on my shoulder and he's like, don't feel embarrassed. You're doing your job. You can only control yourself. And these guys are higher ranking than you. So I was like, thank you, sir. It was embarrassing. It was embarrassing. So exercise goes. I mean, it was like an Oktoberfest for all these guys. It was, like I said, embarrassing. And all of a sudden it comes Friday and I'm like, great, fantastic. This is going to be a great way to engage the command, and I'm going to probably pitch in, and hopefully we have a good discussion. Come to find out, that particular brief was canceled. The highest ranking U.S. general officer there, the one in charge of operations, canceled it and replaced it with what I can refer to as his own personal talent show in front of the entire command.
Perfect.
He and one of his lackeys broke out some guitars and they just started playing a really bad version of Brown Eyed Girl in front of the entire command.
What?
Ukraine is getting its butts kicked.
Yeah.
Crimea got taken over.
Mm-hmm.
ISIS is running rampant and taking land left and right. The Taliban is closing in into Kabul. And the director of operations, U.S., is more interested in showing his 8th grade skills of playing guitar. And that's how we rolled. So, we get back to the command and I'm like, it's, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
Every time I've tried to brief, I've been told not to brief. I'm being ignored. I'm being asked about my patriotism. My briefs are being canceled. My reports are being shredded. I want to move from the job. Stay in the command. I'll go somewhere else. I'm wasting my time. Not only I'm wasting my time with people that really don't want to listen and whose priorities are drinking parties, vacation, not coming to work. One of the problems that we had in the job was the job would have barbecues, just like most organizations, military organizations will have a get together, have a barbecue, right? Mm-hmm. But then the following day, people wouldn't come to work because they'll be too drunk. In fact, the alcohol consumption was getting so out of hand that we had a U.S. service member lose his driving privileges as a result of one of these parties because he got on his vehicle and then got busted. And knowing that, there was no fixing the problem. You just kept on going. The alcohol consumption and the partying and the not coming to work the following day was the way it worked. And that was okay with the leadership of the J3. Completely okay. So I was like, I want out of here. I want to go work. And one of the positions that I was looking at, it was J9, had a intermilitary cooperation, which meant going to visit some of the countries that are friends of NATO, but not part of NATO, and go work, with them, train them, do planning with them and coming back. And I was like, look, I got all my languages. I can do this. And I requested to move. And I requested them, I was like, look, this to the general. I was like, look, this is what's happening. And this, I would like to move. Now, moving in NATO is only to be approved by the U.S. officer, especially if you're U.S. Mm-hmm. And in the meantime, there were a lot of people that were moving behind his back because the senior officers of different services were allowing it behind the general's back. I was like, no, I want my move to be official, how it's written, how it's supposed to be done, because I don't want to be accused of, sidelining or breaking the rules. So I submitted a letter. And at the time, the senior Marine there, a lieutenant colonel, blocked it. He's like, no, it's not. I'm like, sir, you don't understand this is a request mast. I want to address the general. And I'm going to do it. I'm just giving you the courtesy to make your recommendation. But this is a request mask. I'm requesting mask over because of favoritism and some of the dealings in the JOC that the general needs to understand what was happening. So I submitted a letter and he blocked it, which is illegal. By the way, blocking a request mask is illegal. It stayed there for a while, and eventually it got to the point that I was like, you know what? It passed like 6 weeks. It was blocked. Every single time the senior Marine there was like, oh no, it's been maybe after the summer, maybe before the summer. Every single time was an excuse. And there's a reason why. Because he had managed to get himself early orders out of the command, and he was trying to hide them. He was telling the colonel that the commander, the U.S. general, that he received surprise orders, when in reality, he was requesting the other command, hey, the command is letting me leave. Both of which were not true. And having to come up with discussing my move would put him in danger because the truth may come up. He had to stand in front of the general months before, because he was actually supposed to execute the move in the summer of 2014 before this particular exercise. But it got brought to light that he was lying to the general and he was lying to the accepting command. He had to stand in front of the general, and the general told him, it's like, unless you get a replacement, you're not going anywhere. So all of a sudden he said, a couple of weeks later, it's like, I got a replacement. He's coming in next summer. So I don't know how the Army works, but people don't get orders a year and 3 months out.
Yeah, no, that's not a thing.
Their move.
No,
that never happened. Only it's just command or a school.
Right.
That's
and even schools are like 6 to 8 months though. You know.
Correct. And I was like, this smells foul, but he's a lieutenant colonel. I'm not going to question his integrity. So he cut a deal with the general. So okay, I can leave by December because I got a by name person coming in, but he would not release the name. No, it's privacy, whatever. Come on, I need to know. I need to know who I'm going to be sponsoring him. I need to know. So he would keep it quiet. And once again, this is November timeframe. December, he's moving. So he is. I am in danger of having to stand in front of the general and getting my move canceled again, and possibly being done for lying to the general. So I went straight to the general with my request. I went to him and I was like, "Sir, I am fearing reprisal. This was happening. The request mask was blocked, and the next thing is going to be reprisal. I got an evaluation coming up in December. I already had one in May, which was glorious. I am the top of all the majors this guy has ever written. He's written like on 6, evaluated 6. I'm the top of all the guys, and I'm fearing reprisal right now." So he had several of the senior officers that were involved in this stand up in front of him. It's like, you will not reprise against Andrés.
Yeah.
But he didn't follow through. So Marine Corps evaluations are supposed to be given at least, I think it's 10 or 15 days before submission. So there can be a discussion between the officer who's evaluating and the evaluated officer. Mm-hmm. This guy gave me the evaluation an hour before he left the command for good.
Oh, how nice of him.
Yeah, which is pretty cowardly.
Yeah.
So he left, and I got stuck with the evaluation, which was lower, and which is, in any kind of board you can see it. And this was not my first issue with evaluations, because the evaluation before that I told you about, that was very, very laudable, and I had that was the best written over, whatever. I received it late, and it was submitted late. So it was submitted late to Headquarters Marine Corps in the summer. And at the time, I was in the board for command. Mm-hmm. So, and as you will know, evaluation deadlines are usually mapped according to upcoming boards. So this particular evaluation had to be in the system by 30 May. The board for Lieutenant Colonel Command was in June. So that way, every single Lieutenant Colonel, was Lieutenant Colonel Select at the time, every single Lieutenant Colonel Select would have his entire full completed paperwork ready for the board to see. My evaluation was not submitted to Headquarters Marine Corps until after the board, which made my package incomplete,
right?
Which may be ineligible, which gave me a P for Passover, which is a tick mark that you really can't get rid of. Right. And when they addressed this, they told me, I just write something to the Board of Correction and Records, they'll take care of it. And I actually talked to the Chief of Staff about it. You do understand that this process takes 18 months. And the next board is in less than a year. And the response was, your problem, not mine. So I already had this problem with the promotion and my evaluations. So fast forward, um, the general was contemplating moving me, despite the JOC director's standing. It's like, no, he's not going. He started coming up with allegations that I had behavioral problems. He started saying that I had behavioral problems and I was unruly and I was, what do you call it, disrespectful, and I was not effective, and I was like the worst Marine ever. Okay. So I already had an evaluation that was the cream of the crop. And not only that, this is the same person who gave me a recommendation letter, a laudable recommendation letter for a PhD program at night, saying that I was among the best officers ever written. And all of a sudden, a couple of months later, after requesting mask because of his favoritism, now he's saying I have behavioral problems. So come up around the April timeframe. Okay, I'm hoping for my move to be May and June. April timeframe, and it's coming up. And all of a sudden, I start having some of my peers come over. It's like, hey, Andres, you got a minute? I was like, yeah, sure. What's up? So, hey, the senior intel guy, the colonel, one of the colonels over there, is asking funny questions about you. So, what's he asking about? He's asking if you take off from work with authorization, if you don't come to work sometimes, or if you take off early, or if you come in late. And I was like, what? And I was like, so what's your answer? It's like, so you're the first one here, and you're the last one here. And if there's anybody that is at work every single time, it's you. I'm like, exactly. I mean, record shows it. And it's kind of strange because to get into the building, you have a badge that you have to swipe. So there's logs showing the time that you're coming in. I was always at work usually 30 to 45 minutes before. And as time goes by, this is the end of April 20 something. I get an email from my peer who sat next to me. So in the JOC, we were sitting in different kind of clusters, and the guy in front of me was the intel guy. And the intel guy, he was the one that I told you his briefs were lame and old, and they were misinformation, and if anything was old, outdated intelligence. It was useless. Next to me was a female British lieutenant commander, similar rank as major for the ground forces. And when she arrived at the beginning of 2014, and she was very, very shy, to the point that she was actually, I would say, scared of interacting with people. And I extended my hand in friendship. I was like, hey, hey, I'm Andres, whatever, what's your name? Where are you from? Blah, blah. We got talking. And after the brief, we would have my team, we would have the custom of, hey, let's go grab a coffee and let's discuss what went well with the brief, what can we improve, and what didn't go so well, and so on, just to make it better for next time. And that was the thematic that I made. She was a little apprehensive at the beginning, but it's like, I'm gonna invite her every single time. And with time, her walls came down, but it took a while. She wasn't treated very well by the rest of her delegation. There were actually some pretty nasty nicknames that they would give her that I'm not going to repeat. I actually don't mention them in the book out of respect to her. But it was obvious that she was not treated very, very well. But with time, we became really good friends, and we joked around respectfully. And come to the end of April, she tells me, she's like, hey, she sends me an email to my personal Yahoo account. And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, this particular colonel, the same guy, is asking strange questions about you. This email actually I have it in the book as well. And it's like, then I bump into her, and later on, she's like, what kind of questions? She's like, he's asking if you take off from work, and if you're engaging in sexual activities during work hours out in town. I'm like, do you know of any time that I skip work? She's like, no. I'm like, okay, so there you go. And apparently that I'm discussing my sexual personal life, and then if I'm making her uncomfortable. And at that moment, that sort of raised my alarm. I was like, okay, Michelle, have I ever said anything of any sort, of any form, of any subject that at any moment has made you feel uncomfortable? even the slightest. And she's like, no. I'm like, have I at any time crossed any line, physically, verbally, mentally, imaginary, with you, or anything that could be seen or interpreted by any other person that's crossing the line? She's like, no. I'm like, I'm not worried. I'm like, I just want to make sure, because sometimes you don't know. Sometimes you may say something that could sound like something else.
Sure.
You don't know. So let it go. Then I was shortly after that, I went on leave to Spain. I went to Spain on leave. That was right a couple of days afterwards. It was like the 24th of April, and I came back. I believe it was 9 May is when I came back. And shortly after that is when I am told that I have to stand in front of, I got to be in an office, and I was going to be interrogated. So I went, and that's when I was told I was under investigation. And they started telling me the charges. You're under investigation for sexual harassment. You're under investigation for unauthorized absence, which is AWOL, taken off from work, disrespect, conduct unbecoming. Direction of duty. A lot of ironic stuff. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing with sexual harassment was that a lot of the JOC briefs began not by me, but by a particular senior officer in the JOC with a sexual joke almost every time. And these briefs were telecommunicated to other headquarters and the entire command. So, and yet I am being accused of sexual harassment. This is kind of ironic. So I'm listening to the questions, and a lot of them are, do you take off? Do you take off during work? I'm like, I have no problem. I have nothing to hide. I'm going to answer the questions. And as the questions keep on coming, I was like, sir, if you have any questions regarding my presence at work or my attendance, I'm sure you can go to the security section and pull the logs under my name, and they'll show you that I am here half an hour before, and I'm usually here half an hour after work. And if you see me leaving, it's during lunchtime to walk across the street to go to the gym and come back. And I also got a little tag that I can swipe over this. I can show you that I'm only 30 seconds from one building to the other one. No, that's okay. Then there was one allegation that I don't know if you know the book, Shit That My Dad Says, is by Justin Hopper. It's a hilarious book. And the book is about candid conversations and interaction between a father who's a bit grumpy with a son. They're hilarious, but there's nothing sexual about it. And one of the accusations was that I was reading off sexually explicit stories from that book. I had that book once or twice in the job because somebody gave it to me, and I had it there on my desk, and I just forgot to bring it home. And there's some funny 2-minute stories of when the kid got served the dish that he didn't like, and so on. And I kind of read it out loud, but they were non-sexual whatsoever. Then a lot of the other questions was that, are you doing your own investigation on the Navy elements height and weight or fitness program? So the Navy at the time, we had Army element, Air Force element, Marine element, and Navy element, all under the headquarters, U.S. And the Navy element had a big problem with being in shape. So, as Heck says this, I don't want to see fat troops.
Yeah.
Navy element. So, in fact, one of the leaders of the Navy element was actually selected to be in that position of command with its promotion withheld because it couldn't meet height and weight standards. It couldn't meet the physical fitness standards. And they still put this person in command. And months before, I've been approached by some of the junior sailors going like, hey, sir, I need your help. And I go, what's up? Hey, sir, I'm seeing a lot of senior sailors. I'm not going to mention names, but they are altering their height and weight information. They're making themselves lighter, and they're making themselves taller so they don't pop as overweight in the program. And they're approaching me. I don't know why, but I was like, look, it's not my business. You guys are not my command. That you got your channels to address with. All right. If my recommendation is gather evidence and submit a complaint, but it's not doing with me. Don't get me involved. In fact, I reported these conversations to the senior Marine in Brussels. Mm-hmm. Sir, I'm hearing this. I'm being told this. I just want to let you know. He's like, what are you getting? How are you getting involved? I'm not getting involved. I'm just letting you know this is happening. And in fact, this conversation was witnessed. But now I'm getting accused that I'm doing an illegal investigation on the Navy, my own investigation. The interrogation ended. I had nothing to hide. I went away. And weeks passed. Investigations usually take about 2 weeks, if that. This one took over a month. And then come to find out, it was the Friday before the week. It was the Monday before Memorial Day weekend. So the Monday before, right on the time frame, I think it was, is when I decided to go like I'm gonna go walk. I'm gonna start gathering evidence on my behalf just in case. So, sorry. One of the accusations that I was taken off from work to do sexual activities was tied to me taking off from work during wartime. What best way to show that these two allegations are untrue by showing my login records? So I went to the guys at the security section. It's like, hey, look, this is the situation. Can you give me logins? And they're like, look, dude, it's like, you're the first one here. It's like, I know. But somebody's saying that I come in late or I don't show up to work, even though a lot of my peers were skipping work, but they were not in trouble without authorization. So they printed me off. How long? Give me 6 months. If they want more, I can give it to them. And I held to them. And then all of a sudden, come that Friday, and I said, you know what? I'm going to walk to this particular Air Force colonel. I'm going to show him. And I left the reports with one of his colleagues because he wasn't there, and I left a note. And I was like, sir, for your review, this situation. That afternoon, a lot of activity took place. And then all of a sudden, I see people getting yanked from the jog by him. And I'm like, whoa, what happened? So that Friday, I get home. It was the start of the weekend, and I get a phone call from the senior Marine in Brussels. It was a colonel. And he started screaming at me. He was present during the interrogation. He started screaming at me. It's like, he ordered me not to gather evidence on my behalf. And he told me that I would never get a copy of the investigation. Both of which are illegal, as you well know.
Yep.
And then come Tuesday morning, I think it was Wednesday because it was a 4-day weekend. And then come Wednesday morning, I sit down in my seat as always in the jog, and the lieutenant commander, female next to me, she's very uneasy, and she's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine. What's up?" She's like, "Oh, just making sure you're okay." Like a little too concerned. I'm like, "Are you okay?" She's like, "Yeah, I'm fine." Then I eventually get orders that I have to report to the JOC director's office. I think it was like 2 or 3 p.m. 1500. I get there, and that's when I'm informed that my clearance has been suspended. And I am not allowed to grab my personal belongings from the JOC. They grab me by my arm like that, and they escort me outside of the building. And they put me in an office in an area that is not secured. So there's no clearance required. And I'm there to wait until further notice. I am forcibly removed from the job. So a lot of my evidence that I had mustered, I couldn't get a hold of. A lot of secret emails that I had not taken out, that had a special folder that I could use as evidence, I could not gather it. They kicked me out of the job. So I'm sitting outside, and then the following day, I get my former boss, who was a lieutenant colonel, Army lieutenant colonel, comes over, and he's like, "I don't know what's going on, but whatever is going on is messed up." And he said, "I was just told an investigation finished yesterday." I was like, "Really?" It's like, "Yeah, that's why we can come here and talk to you." And they're like, "Yeah." It's like, "Well, I don't know what the exact accusations, but I don't know what's going on. But apparently, I'm sexually harassing somebody." And she's like, "Yeah, I think it's Michelle." And I'm like, "Sir, have you heard or me sexually harassing you?" He's like, "No." But they told me that later on, that a few days afterwards, they saw her crying in one of the rooms that had a lot of glass, and there was the intel colonel, the investigator, also signing some forms. And that was the thing: is like, who led this investigation? Was the Air Force colonel in charge of the intelligence section that I was pissing off for doing my work. The guys that I was embarrassing, the leader conducted this investigation.
Mhm.
I was like, okay, fine. You want to kick me out? That's fine. I want a copy of the investigation. I want a copy. I lost access to a lot of the evidence, but I'm sure I can gather most of it. So I want to know what the nature of the accusations are, who said what. It's my right. It's my constitutional right. Nothing. Everybody's like, oh, no, my problem. I don't have it. I had a lawyer at the time, not the most useful person in the world. I'll send emails, but nothing. He was completely okay with me not receiving a copy of the investigation. It didn't help that the fact that he was in Virginia, I'm in Europe, and the time difference. But no access to the investigation. All of a sudden, I'm spending about a month in this particular office. It's a logistics office, sitting there, and I'm going on walks just to breathe some air and trying to de-stress. And I start bumping into quite a lot of people that start telling me, it's like, hey, Andres. He's like, hey, I can talk to you because the investigation's over. But rumors are going around that you threatened the female Navy captain in charge of the Navy element, like threaten her with violence. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, who's saying this? It's like, people are hearing this. I'm not saying that people are believing it. Saying people are hearing this. That she's apparently spreading these rumors. And both you know what happens when somebody makes a threat like that. You end up in jail.
I mean, was she actually doing this though? I mean, like, what was she actually making these threats or saying that you were threatening her? Or
later on, I found out that she did.
Okay.
She was like saying this. So then all of a sudden it came like the first week of July. I get presented. So they're going to present me my papers of Article 15 non-judicial punishment. And they're like, yeah, it's like another one of the guys is like, they're trying to muster about every big lieutenant colonel they can get a hold of because apparently she's afraid of you because you keep threatening her. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, yeah, they asked me, but I want none of it because I know it's not true. I'm like, okay. So I then present, and all of a sudden it's like a squad of 05s sitting there. And I'm like ready to like jump on me. I'm like, pretty pathetic. So I get my papers and I tell the Navy captain, I was like, ma'am, I want a copy of the investigation. You cannot get it from me, whatever, blah, blah. This is not my problem. One of the problems with her was that she believed that she was in charge of the Marines, which she was not.
Okay. She
believed she was our commander, which she was not. And then in January, the colonel from the one in Brussels, the Marine colonel, made it very clear in writing that they are not yours. And this is a chain of command. And I gave her that letter and she lost her mind. And the way she lost her mind at me when I gave her the letter, I was just a messenger. I was like, when you meet some people and you're like, I need to stay away from this person.
Yeah.
Like I need to like keep a good kilometer away from this person at all times, a good mile and change. That was my reaction. I need to stay away from this person. So, and all of a sudden she's saying that I'm threatening her. It's like, I've had zero communication with her. I want no communication with her whatsoever. So, and then I get, handed, you got the 10 days to make a decision whether you want NJP or you want Article 15 or you want a court martial. And I'm like, I'm not signing anything until I have a copy of the investigation and I get given enough time to read through it. It's my constitutional right. And then about 3 days before the decision deadline, one of the Navy guys comes in and he pulls me to a room where there's just the two of us. And he's like, look, this situation, if you don't accept Article 15 and you don't plead guilty, the accusations of threat will go higher, and you know what's going to happen.
Right. Yep, familiar with that process. So
I was threatened with jail over false accusations.
Yep.
And then, and the Marine Corps does this all the time because it's exactly what happened to Stuart Scheller.
Yeah.
He was wrongfully and illegally imprisoned over really false allegations. So I was like, so I started thinking, I was like, look, my lawyers are suck. The command is not going to give me the investigation. I don't want to be in jail because at the time I had bought a house in Spain, And if I end up with jail time, I will not be able to come into the EU anymore. I will lose my house essentially,
Right.
and also any kind of future employment. However, if I take Article 15 and I do plead guilty, a reasonable commander will be able to pull this away and make it go away if I show him all the evidence that I have.
Yeah, probably not.
Well, I've seen it before.
I mean, you could try.
Correct, but I've seen it before,
Yeah.
and because I've seen it before, I was like, I can do this too. So I had to drive down to Stuttgart, where I sat in front of General Norman Cooling, who his own dealings would catch up to him eventually. He was eventually, in his next command, he was fired. But anyway, so General Cooling, I had to stand in front of General Cooling, and I told him clearly, I have not sexually harassed anybody. And I told him I had no time or option to see the investigation. In fact, when I got there early because eventually his JAG allowed me to see the investigation. Yeah, when you come in, I will leave you a copy, but you still only got a few hours to see it. All of a sudden, there were printer problems and all of the sort. I'm not allowed to see the investigation until like 30 minutes prior, a 90-page plus document. So I stand in front of General Cooling. General Cooling doesn't care, and he punishes me. And the funny thing is I made a lot of statements, harsh statements in that, but non-disrespectful statements in that particular hearing. And when it came to the report of the NJP, which is a report of actually what happened, like verbatim, this person said this person that, all that stuff was deleted. So it was completely manufactured. Anyway, I got punished. I lost money. And I was sent to Norfolk, Virginia. And I had to stand down a board of inquiry, a BOI. A board of inquiry decides whether you're going to stay in service or not. Mm-hmm. So they selected 3 guys, and I got there. And this is when things began to turn a little bit in my favor. So I got there, and I was told, you're going to work in the G4, and you're going to work for this guy. His name is Mr. Lane. Wonderful human being. Retired reservist colonel. And he worked for, my 2 bosses were going to be him, and the other boss was going to be Colonel Matthew Travis, engineer, also retired. He was active service then, now retired. And I was like, you know what? These guys are going to hopefully be honest and not some of the scoundrels that I've been working with. So I sat down with them, and they read me the act. And Colonel Matthew Travis, I remember clearly, I don't want any nonsense from you. And if you pull anything or you lie or you don't tell me the truth, the hammer will drop. And I would not call that a threat. I would just call that a fact.
Right.
He was within his bounds to say that. But I was so happy to hear that from him because he really sounded like a straight shooter. And one of the things that when I went to work with Mr. Lane, I sat right next to Mr. Lane. And I was like, the best thing I can do is be who I am, which is a person that does things right. And second, start showing exactly what happened. So with time coming up to the BOI, I started showing him certain things. And some of the guys, most of the guys, my colleagues in Bronson, didn't want to make any statements or say anything on my behalf because of what happened. If they did this to Andrés, they can easily do this to me. So everybody's kind of quiet. Eventually, the female lieutenant commander, she wrote a letter where she didn't quite express that she was never sexually harassed, but she said that we were friends, we're always friends, and I miss him, and he's a great guy, and so on, and he shouldn't be kicked out of service. So I'm like, that's a big difference from what I started reading in the investigation, that she was saying that she was constantly being sexually harassed by me. That's like a big 180 degrees. Mm-hmm. So before I left Bronson, I remember calling her, and after the investigation was over, and I was like, look, I'd like to sit down with you and have a coffee in a open area where anybody can see. And we did, like by the little PX, it was a little coffee area. And I sat down with her, and I was like, I know I already spoken to you about this and mentioned this before, but if any time I've ever made you feel uncomfortable or harassed or any of the sort or insulted or whatever it is, I'm sorry. I didn't even get to say I'm sorry when she said, you don't need to make an apology because you never have made me feel uncomfortable. Andrés, you have never harassed me. And all of a sudden I'm taken aback. I'm like, I believe there are some accusations out there that say that I've sexually harassed you. Mm-hmm. And based on what you just told me right now, which I believe is very truthful, could you please write a letter saying exactly what you just said? And she looked away. She's like, I can't. I'm like, you do understand there's some accusations out there. At this moment, I didn't know that she had written anything, or she had signed anything. You know there's accusations out there that have done some pretty nasty things allegedly, and now you're telling me there's not true, and apparently you're the victim. And she's like, I can't. And she got up. Thank you for the coffee. Good luck. And walked away. And then one email, which I actually have in the book, I wrote to her. I was like, do you remember that conversation? Could you please write that? And she replied, I cannot write about that conversation because I don't want to write about the investigation. And if I did so, I would. So in that particular case, she's not denying the conversation took place because I actually describe it, but she did just want to write it out. So me and my lawyer that I'm going to deal with at the BOI, Jeffrey Shows is his name, great guy. And I tell him my story. He doesn't quite believe me. He's like, why would all these people lie? And I was like, I really don't have anything to show that I'm telling the truth. And then he's like, I want to be able to have this particular female lieutenant commander in the BOI, at least on the phone, so I can question her. And the guys that made the accusations, which I discovered was the intel guy in front of me and his best friend that was like a couple of chairs over. Into a guy who was frustrated every single time, made the initial accusations, the initial complaint that I was allegedly sexually harassing my peer. So I showed to my lawyer, like, well, we have to go through the investigation. I was like, look, I don't have it. He's like, what do you mean you don't have it? I was like, I've been requesting a copy of the investigation. I never got a copy. He's like, what? Yeah, isn't that illegal? He's like, very. So he finally gave me a copy of the investigation. And I sat down with Mr. Lane. I told him, I was like, sir, I need a day at home to be able to go through this monster and start collecting evidence. So I got home, got a cup of coffee, and started going through it. And I saw 3 different statements written and signed from this particular female lieutenant commander on 27 May, on that particular day that I had my clearance suspended. And that particular day that actually the investigation ended. 3 different statements that apparently I was contacting her via phone, that I had been sexually harassing her, that I asked her to lie, that I constantly made sexual jokes, that I constantly made sexual comments in front of her, that she constantly told me to stop, that I wouldn't stop, that she complained to several officers and nobody would do anything, and so on. The intel guy wrote that I would read sexual stories from that particular book that I told you that has nothing sexual about it, that I briefed on subjects that I was not allowed to brief, and that I called certain senior officers some pretty nasty names. Particularly one Navy captain, I called him allegedly fat and incompetent. And he pointed at a particular date. And then he also pointed at one time that I was approved for a trip and I received the email and I started screaming at the JOC, apparently early in the morning during brief prep, I'm going to get my fuck on. Okay. I just said that over and over again. And you can map that to a date. So anyway, come to the BOI. I didn't have, this particular female lieutenant commander refused to be part of the BOI. The 2 main accusers refused to be part of BOI. And instead, they had the senior Marine, the dude who took off and gave me the bad report because he lied to the general. He spoke against me, and so did the Navy captain that made the allegations. So the lieutenant commander came in first. And then he starts talking about how I parked illegally all the time, how I got my lease out of town without permission, that I didn't go through the housing office, on and on again. He committed perjury about 6-7 times. And then when he was asked, how do you rank, how does this guy rate in your evaluations? He mentioned he's the second lowest of all the Marines I've ever rated. But the thing is that right out at the BOI, I have all my records. I was able to show it. That's a lie. And near the comments. So not just in grading, but also in verbals. Like he rated me as I'm the top 20% of all majors he's ever seen. And the president of the board, who also happened to be the next chief of staff of the command, he rebuked him. It's like, okay, what you said is not what you wrote. So right there's proof of perjury. Chief of staff, even though he kind of pulled us on a chain, didn't do anything about it. Allowed the perjury to continue. And then came the Navy captain, and that's when the Navy captain started saying that she said that she was the commander of all U.S. forces, which was a lie. And then she continued on saying that I refused to obey her orders because as a Marine under the Navy, which also lied because we had completely different um, chains of command. And lastly, she began to saying that she was fearing for her safety because of my threatening behavior.
Cool.
Under oath.
Yeah, I mean, this sounds like a lot of he said, she said stuff. So, I mean, you go through all these things, and I mean, obviously she's full of shit. So, I mean, like, how did this end up resolving? Like, how where you are now with your case and everything else?
So after the BOI, I was able to start gathering evidence, and because some of my friends, some of my former colleagues started understanding, hey, this is not right, and we need to start speaking. So I was able to start gathering evidence and start showing that some of the accusations, particularly mapped to dates, were false. So I saw Andres do this on this particular date, and he wasn't going to work. One of the other allegations was on May 1st, 2015, that 3 colonels had to counsel me because of my misconduct. And they sat me down, and they had records of me calling people and so on and so on. And on May 1st, they sat me down, and they gave me orders, which I violated. Funny thing is that, and that's what I told you before, is rank poker. You got 3 colonels against you, and you're screwed. I was on leave that day. I wasn't even in country. I went to Spain from 24 April all the way to 9 May. So I was able to gather all this evidence, and eventually I talked to Colonel Travis. Like, look, I was accused of violence against a woman or whatever threats, and he called her, and she confessed that it was a lie. Mm-hmm. So I presented all this to my command, saying the counts of perjury and all my innocence. I am innocent. They didn't care. They forward my package for to get kicked out of the Marine Corps. And one of the things that I argued was like, look, I've got PTSD and I got 2 TBIs, and according to orders, you have to give me a medical evaluation. They refused to. They did not. That cost the Assistant Secretary of the Navy to kick the package back, and he did that twice. So all of a sudden, I eventually get submitted to medical reviews for medical evaluations, and they found that, look, we cannot do any of this until he gets PTSD treatment to lower his anxiety levels. And that would have put me all the way to 19 years and 9 or 10 months, still being able to fight my case. So one day, I am going to work on my bicycle because I've been cycling to work for the last 3 duty stations, and I get in an accident. A Land Rover hits me, and I get my second TBI. That was May 17th. So that would make, because the command refused to do a medical evaluation on me, that would have to start the clock all over again. So while I was recovering, a 3-star general and his lackeys fabricated that on 11 May, I had a full evaluation. So 6 days before. His accident doesn't matter anymore because we had a full evaluation. And I was fully evaluated. That particular letter, they kept away from me, which was illegal. Anyway, I was able to get a hold of it through a friend of mine. And I saw it, and I asked my guys, can I go to the medical to print out a record of my visits? And it showed that I never had a visit anytime near 11 May, not even 5 days before, 5 days afterwards. Eventually, I get kicked out of the Marine Corps. Despite all these illegalities, ASN also Assistant Secretary of the Navy also making false writings about my medical record, saying that the radiation, because I got radiation in my body because of Fukushima. I was part of the rescue efforts, saying that the radiation in my body was discovered and detected in 2017. So it shouldn't matter, which is not true. It was discovered in 2011. So a lot of manipulation of records. My PTSD was lowered to, my PTSD records were lowered to reaction to severe stress. But I have the original records showing that the Marine Corps manipulated and altered my medical records, which is similar to what happened to you. And the TBIs were not taken into consideration. So anyway, I kicked out of the Marine Corps, and I submitted to BCNR, the Board of Correction. There were records. Despite over 100 pieces of evidence, I was dismissed. My case was dismissed. So I tried to move on with my life. I moved to the Netherlands. I bought a house. And it was around April of 2019. I already been in law school, and it was a day that I was actually working on my house because I'm repairing. I was restoring at the time, and I go downstairs and to grab my lunch, and I go to my mailbox, open my mailbox, and I find a letter there addressed to me without a return address. Kind of funky. Open it up. So it was a letter from my accuser, a letter from the female lieutenant commander. So months before that, months at the moment that I arrived, a lot of my old friends were catching up to me and seeing me and so on and so on. And they're like, hey, she's here and maybe she'll like to talk to you. And I was like, look, I don't want to deal with her. If she didn't have the courage to come up with the truth at the time that I needed it, I really don't want to deal with her. She's poison. I'm not interested. All these months pass and I find a letter from her. And in the letter, she confessed that she made the false accusations. Not only did she make the false accusations, she says that Andres, you never sexually harassed me. You never disrespected me. And I thought I'll be braver, but at the point I cowered and I just folded. Come to find out, she was able to move to the position that I wanted in the command, that military corporation position. Yeah. And she was allowed to extend, both of which she was told she would never be able to do, in exchange for her statements. I submitted everything to BCNR once again. Confessions. They ignored it. Yep. Board of Correctional Naval Records ignored it. I went to court, went to appeals court. They both said, we're not getting involved because it's military related. Similar to what the Air Force did with some of the cases, saying it's like, yeah, it's what you did. This is completely legal, but we're not getting involved. So I am still hoping to get my case. And then, so I kind of kept quiet, didn't know what to do. And then until I saw the collapse in Afghanistan and the helicopters and the planes taking off from Kabul. And that's when I saw, I was like, I've been talking about this for years. I was trying to raise the alarm. And this is the result. So, and that's when I started writing my book. And I finished it last year.
So, I mean, like, how did that affect you? Like, after all this you went through and you see what's going on in Afghanistan, like, how did that resonate with you after all you've dealt with?
Well, it angered me. It angered me because a lot of lives were lost up until that very last day in Afghanistan.
Right.
The guys that put the bomb, that was not the Taliban. In Abigail, that was ISIS. And that was one of the things that I explicitly advised the command. It's like, ISIS will get into Afghanistan in a matter of months.
Right.
And I was dismissed. And then when I see the story of Stu Scheller, Stu Scheller is being accused that he used the wrong channels to address his grievances. And that's why that happened to him. Well, guess what? My case proves that those right channels do not work. And they only accelerate the punishment, the illegal punishment against a Marine.
Yes.
So it shows. Stu Scheller used illegal channels. I used legal channels. Same effect. And there's one thing that I would like to. I mean, I would love the opportunity to sit down with Stu Scheller and tell him, yes, there were people just like you trying to raise the alarm and asking the hard questions. And this is what happened to us.
Yeah, and you even see all the things that Stu's dealing with now. I mean, it's the fact is, like, it's still not 100% resolved, right? Like,
correct.
This is just the issue that we're dealing with. So
correct. And one of the things that he says is that, he made a posting some time ago on social media saying, if you didn't stand up because you're afraid for your career, if you didn't stand up because you're afraid for promotion, you're a coward. And he's right.
Yeah.
He's absolutely right. And some of us stood up and we ended up feeling the consequences because we had commands. And the sad part is, at the time, Lloyd Austin, all these higher guys talked about ISIS was a surprise. The Taliban takeover of Kabul was a surprise. And the Russian takeover of Crimea and Donbass was also a surprise. BS.
No, they weren't surprises. Everyone knew.
There was plenty of information out there. And there were several of us that were briefing it. We were just told to shut up.
Yeah, we were.
And one of the things I want to do is I want to continue with my case. But obviously judicial processes are not going to do anything.
Yeah, no, they're not. And the problem is you have to go talk to like two people It's the same thing with my case. I've been through the entire process. It doesn't matter. I've been through all the courts and the Board of Corrections and military records. I've been through the President of the United States. I've been to the Secretary of Defense. Like, it doesn't matter. It takes one guy to make one signature. That's what's going to fix your case. And I was going to pull up his book here right now, if I can get it to show up here. Yeah, Criminal Negligent Command, How NATO Ignored the Taliban, the Islamic State, Putin's Moves, and Silenced the U.S. Marines. So you guys should definitely go check out his book, connect with him on all his socials and everything. It's an inspiring story, and unfortunately, it's not the only one I've heard, man. Like, these retaliation cases, false claims, everything else. It's like, when your command has an objective to ruin your life, they'll do whatever it can. It took me 15 years to vindicate myself and get my commission back. And even though I vindicated myself and got my commission back, I still have $240,000 and I don't have on my credit report from DFAS, and I still don't have my degree back from the Air Force Academy despite winning my case, because it takes one signature, right? So yeah, make sure you guys connect with Andres here. He's a great guy. Look up those socials and everything else. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been such an inspiring story. It really has.
Thank you so much, Adam. I really appreciate it. And thank you for sharing your stories and the stories of others. I really appreciate that too.
Yeah, no. All right, guys. And we'll hang on for a second. I'll see you next time here when I play this outro.